Fortnite players are always debating the perfect keybinds, but do they actually make a difference? I've been stuck feeling like my keybinds have been holding me back, so I switched to so-called optimal keybinds for a week and prepared a daily training routine with a challenge at the end to find out, would they make me a better fighter, or just waste my time? My current building binds put way too much strain on one finger. It ends up getting sore, which slows down my edit speed and affects how long I can play the game. So I put my binds on the two side mouse buttons and the rest of them were on any key that wouldn't restrict my movement. But that made me put one of my keybinds on my thumb, which I wouldn't be able to hit without hitting my spacebar. So I moved my movement binds from WASD to WASQ. That freed up my index finger and even let me edit while sprinting to the right, which is something you can't do on normal WASD. With all of my binds optimized, it was time to see if this crazy setup would actually make me better, or if I just ruined my muscle memory for nothing. Day 1 was focused solely on simplicity and getting used to the new keybinds. To do so, I started off by free building at a slower speed and tried to replicate simple moves that are common in the game, like single and double edits. As you'd expect, I struggled a lot since I couldn't even remember what any of my keybinds were. The free building was mostly so I could get used to the new build binds, but I also had to get used to my new movement, which I took care of in a piece control map. I used this map to continue my progress in builds and to help me get used to moving while doing so. I did this same scenario over and over again so that I could get used to the movement, placement, and timings without confusing myself too much. Getting used to a completely new movement bind was tougher than I thought because I found myself repeatedly hitting edit instead of moving to the right and had to remind myself each time that I had to hit Q instead. To track my progress throughout the week, I chose to end each session with some form of 1v1. To sum up that experience, it didn't go so well. Fumbling my binds constantly was the main reason for my death, which made sense since it was only day 1. And I won't bore you guys with day 2 because it was practically the same thing as day 1. I free built to get used to my movement binds, did some piece control maps so I could move a little bit, and tried to 1v1 some other players in fills. On day 3 I was feeling a bit more comfortable with my builds, so I moved on to trying triple edits and some piece moves of my own. When it came to both, I found that using my floor and cones came a bit easier to me compared to my wall and stair. Once I finished free building to the best of my ability, it was time to hit the 1v1s. Compared to my first 2 days, I looked much more comfortable moving around and placing builds, but I was struggling to move to the right when I intended. As for my edit key, there were times where it would look like I'm just staring at my wall, but in reality, I was trying to edit, but I was hitting the wrong key. Even with my struggles though, I managed to pull off some highlights that managed to make me look not as bad. Days 4 and 5 were when things started to really pick up. My triple edits were starting to improve, which you could tell by how much more consistent I was when I tried to hit them. They definitely weren't perfect yet, but they were definitely an improvement from where I first started. I also tried to recreate some retakes I would always do before. It was kind of rough, but I was getting much more comfortable with the movements and what build pieces I had to place. The rest mostly came down to timing and proper crosshair placement. Since I was getting manhandled in box fights, I chose to try some piece control tunnels to see if it could help with my movement and getting used to placing stairs and walls. I was struggling at first, but that was because I was trying to go too fast and I was more worried about looking good than making sure I take my time and hit each edit consistently. After reminding myself of that, I did end up moving a little bit slower, but I was more consistent and messed up my edits less. I felt like this was helping me get more used to my new movement binds, so I wanted to see how this would translate over to 1v1s. I couldn't do anything flashy, but I finally felt like my movement wasn't holding me back. As for my issue with the edit key, I could hit it more consistently, but would mess it up at certain times. I was even able to put some people in a box, but It still didn't end too well when I tried that, but you could see that my playstyle was slowly gaining back confidence and I was able to make slightly more aggressive plays. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but it was on day 6 that I realized I had made a huge mistake. After doing my usual routine of free building and box fights, I finally had enough confidence to play some realistic 1v1s, but it was there that I realized that I had absolutely no practice on scenarios where I had to consistently build, and more specifically, build upwards. In most of my free builds, if I build upwards, it would be because I'm doing double or triple edits, but not actual protective retakes that I would need in fights. So as you could imagine, my first few fights were quite rough. No way he gets that. I kept panicking and just trying to build like I used to, but I had to remind myself to slow down and that the only way I would actually improve was by starting slow and building up to how I used to be able to build. When I chose to do that, my decision proved to be a good one because I started playing a little bit better once I followed that advice. So for the last 2 days, my goals were to improve my fighting in realistic scenarios. On the last day, my usual routine of free building and doing 1v1s was going pretty smoothly. That was until it was time to play some realistics where I ran into the biggest sweat I have ever run into in my entire Fortnite career. To put it simply, this guy was constantly overwhelming me. Not only was he fast, but he was smart in the way he fought. And for me, who was on new keybinds, I could barely keep up with him, let alone make a full box. Even when I tried to keep in mind to just play slow and controlled and win as many fights as possible, I'd still get clipped. But at least he wasn't toxic though, and he wanted to say hi for the video. Now, even though my confidence had completely dissolved, the kids that I played afterwards weren't as dominant as him, so I had a decent time fighting. With the training arc almost being over, the last thing I tried to do for the week was win a game on my own with my new optimal keybinds. It was quite nerve-wracking when I was going into my first few games, but I started to get surprised at how good I actually was despite only being on these new binds for 7 days. I couldn't manage to pull off a win despite my best efforts, but regardless, for 7 days on optimal keybinds, I was definitely showing improvement. After a week on these new binds, I can't say I'm lightning fast yet, but that wasn't really the goal. What I did get was huge. I can now build for long periods of time without my fingers cramping or my hand feeling sore. Not only that, but I can also feel that I can place builds faster compared to my old binds. I personally feel like I've raised my skill ceiling, and now I'm excited to see how much better I'll get as my mechanics catch up. If you want to continue to see me grind these binds, or maybe even push my mechanics to the next level, let me know in the comments. I love to keep you guys updated on this whole optimal keybinds journey. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, and if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe because that goes a long way. And since you made it this far, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this next video right here.